Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. My name is Mathias. I'm the Global Advocacy Lead at the Leprosy Mission International and a person affected by neglected tropical diseases. And I would like to welcome you to this online CRPD conference side event entitled Reaching the Millions of Underrepresented People Affected by Neglected Tropical Diseases, why it matters that their voice is missing, and what they have to offer. This event is presented by the Leprosy Mission and our partners, Disabled Peoples International. I would like to start with a few notes of housekeeping. Firstly, for those of you who are unable to see me, please allow me to describe my appearance. I'm wearing a dark gray suit, a white shirt, and a red tie with tiny white details on it. At this side event today, we have international sign language interpretation available. We are very grateful to our interpreters, Arun and Saurav, for providing us with this service. We also have the Zoom closed captioning available, and you can see the option to switch to the captioning at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, as you may be able to see, some of the panel today are online, and some of us are here in person. We have attended the CRPD conference in New York this week. And I would like to extend my thanks to the End Fund, who have very kindly offered us the space to the in-person panelists. And it was not easy to find affordable and accessible space in Manhattan. So we really appreciate this. And the End Fund also works with neglected tropical diseases. And I have here a model of, or an example of, this is called roundworm, I've been told. And this is the average amount that you can find in one person's stomach. Sorry to those who, for whom this image is a bit much. We also have the Q&A functionality available in this webinar, and we're hoping that we will have time to make full use of this. So if you have questions for our panel, please do put those in the Q&A box. So why are we talking about this topic and this community at the CRPD conference? We have around 1.7 billion people continuing to suffer from neglected tropical diseases, which are a group of 20 preventable and treatable diseases that place a heavy burden on low-income regions of the tropics. Individuals and communities living in impoverished conditions, they're lacking proper water and sanitation, and in close proximity with disease-carrying insects and animals, are the most vulnerable to these diseases and worst affected by them. In the worst cases, NTDs can kill affected individuals, although more often NTDs cause a variety of impairments and morbidity that are frequently chronic and irreversible. And 1 in 5 of the world's poorest people has a disability, and the majority of this same population group are infected with or at risk from an NTD. Almost all of the NTDs can cause disabilities. As examples, trachoma and onchocerciasis can cause blindness. Leprosy, chikungunya, yaws, lymphatic filariasis, and Buruli ulcer can lead to physical impairments. Chagas disease and African trypanosomiasis cause a range of disabling outcomes. NTDs can also lead to disabilities indirectly. For instance, soil-transmitted helminths and schistosomiasis can cause delayed physical and mental development for affected children, predisposing them to disabilities. People with NTDs also often face stigmatizing attitudes and social inclusion, which leads to high levels of mental ill health, even in the absence of vision loss. Trachomatous trichiasis can reduce quality of life and participation in activities of daily living because of the pain and discomfort that it causes. The reason for the global attention on NTDs is actually because of their disabling effect, as few are directly linked to mortality. One of the themes of the CRPD conference is reaching the underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities. In my week at the conference, I have not heard anyone speak of persons with neglected tropical diseases, apart from members of my own delegation from the Leprosy Mission. If this community is not underrepresented, then who is? And so now that we understand the importance of this topic, I would like to introduce our expert panel. Here with me in the room is Afliana Lisnahan Reis. You will let me know if I'm saying that right. We know her as Nona. She is the Executive Director of Misaun Lepra Timor-Leste, which is the Leprosy Mission in Timor-Leste. They are the only NTD partner for Timor-Leste's Ministry of Health. Nona has more than 50 years of experience working with the Leprosy Mission in Timor-Leste. Do we have Mr. Abdullah yet? Okay. We're still waiting on one of the panelists to join, but I will meanwhile introduce the other ones. Mr. Björk Arnak is the co-founder of the Leprosy and Neglected Tropical Diseases Organization in South Sudan, Landos. He's a microbiologist and a refugee. He's an active community mobilizer with particular focus on youth and women empowerment. Then here next to me is Michael Herbst, head of advocacy for CBM Germany. He works for human rights, people with disabilities, and he was a general manager of a German organization for people with disabilities and has been working with CBM since 2014. We also have with us Mr. Abdullah Aliyu Usman. He's the national president of the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, the umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities in Nigeria. He's a disability advocate with over 20 years of experience, and Mr. Abdullahi is the representative for Disabled People International. Mr. Usman.
Yeah.
I have a...
Hi.
Hi. So good to have you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Other good morning or good afternoon.
Yes. So good to have you here with us. And my first question is actually for you.
Okay.
So are persons affected by NTDs included within the wider disability sector? And should they be?
Well, thank you very much. What I'm going to say here, the answer to this your question is partially yes, because I cannot say yes and I cannot say no automatically. For example, if you go here in Nigeria, the only person with neglected tropical disease who are in the umbrella organization of persons with disability, I mean the Federation of Disabled, is person affected by leprosy. Although the person affected by leprosy, the neglected tropical disease has already transferred them to make them to become persons with disabilities. So that is why I say this one is partially yes and partially no, because here in Nigeria, almost the other neglected tropical diseases, the person affected by other neglected tropical diseases are not identifying themselves with a community of persons with disability. Likewise, the person with disabilities are not identifying themselves with the person with neglected tropical diseases. Well, maybe after the neglected tropical disease transferred to the person where he become person affected by any disability, then that person is now in the community. But as far as is in the level of, for example, trachoma is a neglected tropical disease, and trachoma will lead somebody to become even total blind. So once somebody has trachoma, you will not see that person will not agree to join the movement of person with disability, because there is a difference, more especially here in Nigeria. The people affected by any neglected tropical diseases have been going to their own different, let's say, rehabilitation centers, where they will go and be treating their diseases with the hope that within a short period of time, they will be okay. So when they are treating their whatever affected them among the diseases, they will be thinking that they are not persons with disability. So that is the biggest difference between person with disability here in Nigeria and person affected by any neglected tropical diseases. They are not fully included within the disability sectors. Why? Because they did not identify themselves as person with disability, and person with disability did not accept them as also person with disability. Then the second part of your question was say, shall this be? It can be, but only on a very, very good advocacy, maybe sensitization and also advocating both person with disabilities and person affected by neglected tropical diseases. If they have a very wider sensitization and they understand the need for both of them to move together so that they will fight their right at the same time, I know it can be, but presently now, honestly, it's not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Usman, for giving us a real picture of what the situation is like, especially in your country, and I think there's similarities with other countries. And I think that also gives us something that is on our to-do list to continue forging that relationship and working together. The same question goes for Mr. Pior Garan. Are persons affected by NTDs included in the wider disability sector, and should they be?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I think I will be able to echo a bit what Abdullah said. in terms that persons afflicted by neglected tropical diseases are usually mostly not considered within the wider disability sector or within the wider disability sphere. And this, as Mr. Abdullahi has actually said, comes from 2 points. The first one is that we see at the early onsets of neglected tropical diseases, most of them usually do not cause permanent disability. And the concept that most of the people or most of the communities usually have is that a disability is something that you can see. In case of individuals afflicted by leprosy, at the later stage, you can be able to see that leprosy tend to cause them to lose limbs, such as hands and maybe their feet. And then you can be able to see that physical manifestation of the neglected tropical diseases as being physical disability. Now, that is the mental concept that most people usually have with disability. But what we usually don't understand is that a majority of the disabilities within communities are usually invincible. You cannot see them. Individuals might be disabled in other ways because most of these neglected tropical diseases have a way of affecting the whole human system. So you can find that individuals can become disabled in non-physical ways that can be seen, but then now you won't be able to think that they are disabled because you can't be able to see the disabilities or the physical disabilities that they have. Trachoma is a good example that it can be able to cause somebody to be blind, but there are other internal disabilities that cause, such as impacting the nervous system. It also causes learning disabilities. Things like human parasitic worms can be able to affect children in terms of their development growth and also their intellectual development. And those are usually not considered because you cannot physically see those disabilities, but they are being disabled in one way or the other, but they are just invincible. Now, why should they be considered as disabled, or should they be kept within the wider disability sector? I can be able to echo again Abdallah and say that it's a yes and it's a no. It will be a no on the concept that during the early stages when the sufferers are still undergoing developmental stages of the neglected tropical diseases, we see that they have not yet manifested permanent physical disabilities. But on the later stages, where now the diseases has progressed, then we usually see remarkable disability within these sufferers, especially when it's not treated. Things such as leprosy, trachoma, and almost all neglected tropical diseases usually end up causing the sufferers to have a disability that can be considered as a disability. The issue is that we have legal systems that do not tend to be in line with the medical facts that are actually on the ground, because medically we see that neglected tropical diseases can cause these disabilities, but the legal system is not yet in line to be able to recognize this as disabilities. And we find that these sufferers tend to fall in between the legal cracks, and they, as such, they cannot be recognized as disabled. There's also lack in advocacy that is missing the gap to tell these people that they're actually supposed to be within the disability sector because they are impaired in one way or another. And when you're impaired in one way or another, you become disabled in that concept. And as such, you should get assistance either from the society or from the legal systems that are there, so that you can live in dignity and so that you can also live a meaningful life. So I'll be able to stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Kanga. The same question goes to Michael. Are persons affected by NTDs included within the wider disability sector, and should they be?
If they are, thank you for having me. If they are included, I must say, okay, you can't differentiate it by seeing a specific person if he or she is affected by NTDs or not. I think they are not really well represented in the wider disability movement as far as I can see it, for different reasons. I think that the disability movement doesn't different usually in people born with disabilities and people that got a disability later in life. So the main vision and mission of organizations of people with disabilities is to improve the living conditions in the society, in the representative societies. And the fact is, they are not acting primarily as a sort of a patient organization. So this is important. They're sticking to human rights, and a human right is the right on health. That's clear. But they don't different the cause of why people having a disability. And if you ask me, should they more and better considered? Clear answer, absolutely yes. Because, you know, to find people that are affected by NTDs, you have to go this famous last mile. You find that people mostly in rural areas, and you find them where poverty exists, where it's lagging on Eugene, where we have unsafe water and so on. So in dangerous areas, and for this NTD affected people are a sort of a tracer. They can show here is a problem. Here we have to start to implement to fulfill the human rights of people with disabilities and the other people living in this specific area. So I would say absolutely, it is not up to me as an INGO representative to tell the organizations of people with disabilities, hey, come on, do this or leave that. But I think it would be good if they would deeper look into this NTD issue and see, okay, these people affected by NTDs have a lot to tell and a lot to contribute in the advocacy work of OPDs.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I think you've raised an important issue that I must say we as a leprosy organization are still learning also about this, because we come from a long tradition of like a charity approach, a medical approach, and we're still learning the human rights approach. And I think that we can't, we need to keep the medical approach, because we also want to prevent people from developing impairments. But we also need for people who already have impairments, and that includes people affected by NTDs, but also people who are born with an impairment. We need to make sure that their human rights are guaranteed. Yeah, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, I think it always helps if people get together, support each other, fight together for their rights.
Exactly, but when you look at try to answer the question, what is inclusive health services? What are inclusive health services? Then it goes in two directions, right? The first direction is a primary health service you implement somewhere has to be able to reach people with disabilities and living in a specific area. And on the other hand, an inclusive health system should be able to prevent people from getting disabilities. And this is what we talked about this morning, primarily. So these are the two roads we have to go when we talk about inclusive health services.
Thank you so much. Nona, what do you think are the challenges to reaching underrepresented groups like persons affected by NTDs and hearing their voices? And how can we overcome those challenges?
Thank you for the opportunity, Mathias. And I think this is a great opportunity because myself and my organization is working in the grassroots, so we are part of that, do you guys say, underrepresented groups. So based on their our field experience, the big challenges that we have is like you just mentioned, that most our approach is about medical approach, about how to eliminate, how to eradicate, and that's what our aim when we go to the field. And one is, I'm saying that one is the approach that we have, that's also a challenge, that when we only focus on a medical approach, then we left the other aspects like the human rights, other human rights aspect, living their life, or a holistic approach that they need. And one is in Timor, it's difficult with our geographical areas. The geographical areas challenge us to reach those who are experiencing living with NTDs, because you know that those who living with NTDs is living in very remote or very rural area part of and they're living in very poor conditions. That that's why they they're having NTDs, and also lack of support from this from our side, and the other side is also lack of support from their family or their caregiver to bring them to access to the services that we have. But lack of the support is also because of there is no information, education, or communication that reaches them to give them a clarity about this program that we have. So that's the challenge, and in our area also it's difficult to access. In some areas, still difficult, very difficult to access to health system that we have. And then with limited resource that we have, of course, we not cover all the whole area of the people affected by NTDs. And in our works, we work with leprosy. And sometimes the challenge is also because we are a leprosy focused organization. Sometimes we just go for leprosy, and then we not trying to working together with others in the community. So yeah, one of the way now we are trying to do to overcome this is we doing an integral approach. So we call ourselves we doing health integrated approach. I think our Minister of Health, our government has launched what we call Saudi Na Familia. It's the program that when the team goes to the community, it's not only looking for one or two kinds of disease, but it's for everything, list everything. And then we trying to build the community, empower the community to have the clear with the referral system, and the giving them enough information, enough support them so they know where to go when they need this kind of so that's how we see that it's working now. Is we have to have an integrated approach in the way of reaching those who and one thing that really important is to partner with those who in the community, because we like it or not, they are the one who there, and they know exactly, they know how to find those people who we couldn't find or we couldn't reach them and know better their situation. And sometimes we forgot that we thought that we're coming with all our good planning, our resource and thing, we know everything, but now those who living in that area is the most powerful people that we could partner with them if we want to end this NTDs living in the country, living in the grassroots level. CBOs, DPOs, Association of Leprosy, or other association that also could help us to reach underrepresented group. Thank you.
Local people find local solutions to local problems. Very good.
That's good.
I like what you're approaching.
Bjorn, the same question goes for you. What are the challenges to reaching underrepresented groups like persons affected by NTDs and hearing their voices? And how do we overcome these challenges?
Thank you for that question. And to be able to answer this, I think I should be able first to give us a context and background as to who are really affected by these neglected tropical diseases. And we do see that neglected tropical diseases usually affect the most of the poor within the communities. And these are mainly usually prevalent within the developing world and the developing countries. And now when we look at the context of the developing countries, there are a lot of other issues that those communities and governments are trying to fight with. Poverty and other so-called kind of like the so-called superstar diseases, such as malaria and the other contagious diseases. So in such a context, you find that neglected tropical diseases tend to also fall now into a category of super neglect, because nobody tends to be paying attention to them. Because in the first place, the ones who are afflicted by this disease are the poorest of the poor. And the ones who are actually being given the needed medical help are the ones who are kind of like a bit well off, and the ones who can be able to pay maybe their taxes. So the governments and the international institutions tend to go for the contagious diseases that are affecting the kind of like whole population, and the ones that can easily usually be tried to be dealt with. And this one kind of like gives a neglect to the neglected tropical diseases. That's hence the name why they're called neglected tropical diseases. That is one of the concepts as to how these diseases, or the problem that is being faced in terms of how these neglected tropical diseases can be eradicated, or the challenges that are usually faced within this sphere of neglected tropical diseases. Now, how can this be covered, or how can this be resolved? One of the best solutions will be to keep the neglected tropical disease afflicted communities on the decision-making tables, so that when we are discussing about the implementation of solutions, let the neglected tropical disease afflicted persons or their representatives or their groupings be on the discussion tables, be it on the international discussion tables such as this, so that their voices can be heard. Because when we are not hearing their voices, we are not being aware of them existing. Also, giving them the platform is also a way of giving them recognition, so that when they're recognized, it's also a human right that they should be heard, and that what is afflicting them within the community should also be kept within the mainstream, be it media, or within the mainstream tables where discussions are being made on health issues and also on social issues. This will be able now to prevent the challenge of neglected tropical diseases afflicted communities not being reached, so as to avoid the focus on the usual diseases that the medical sectors usually focus on, and not neglecting the neglected tropical diseases to the realms of it only afflicting the poor people. Now, when we come to the context of South Sudan, which is currently one of the world's most affected countries with neglected tropical diseases, it will be prudent first for us to be able to see what is exactly on the ground and how this is affecting people. A recent World Health Organization and World Bank survey indicated that close to 47% of the population is at risk of trachoma. And in some other areas, that goes up to 87%. Now, in some settings, it also says that there is an additional widespread endemicity of onchoriosis, that is river blindness, and then also schistosomiasis, that is bilharzia. There is also lymphatic filariasis, that is elephantitis, and in all the 10 states in South Sudan, there is at least a prevalent of 5 of the neglected tropical diseases that are there. Now, when you look at the context of South Sudan and how endemic the neglected tropical diseases are, and that these diseases affect the poorest of the poor, and in South Sudan, that is close to almost 70% of the total population, then you are looking at a humanitarian crisis. A humanitarian crisis that is not only a health crisis, but is going to be a total crisis all over the board. And the most afflicted individuals are impacted by this disease are actually usually the children and the ones who cannot be able to help themselves, because these are usually the poorest of the poorest communities. So what we see with neglected tropical diseases is kind of like a very vicious cycle, very vicious social cycle and a very vicious health cycle. And in order to get out of that, we must be able to let these voices be heard. Whenever international policies are being made, consult with these afflicted communities, because what we usually see is that on the international table making process, these projects or programs on how to eradicate neglected tropical diseases are usually made by experts who have no experience with what these communities actually need and what they actually want and how the solutions are going to impact and affect them. So when we bring them on board, that's when we'll be able to get the exact solutions of how this the eradication of neglected tropical diseases can be done. And I think that is one of the ways we can be able to deal with these issues of the challenges of reaching neglected tropical disease communities and their afflicted. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Björn. There is a term that I've heard and that I quite like, is that persons affected by NTDs or persons affected in any field, they might not be recognized experts in, but they are experts by experience. And most of the times they can tell us things that no expert will tell us. Yeah, yesterday we had a beautiful example with Anna Ivonia speaking at the roundtable at the CRPD conference. So Michael, how can we ensure that persons affected by NTDs achieve their rights under the CRPD? Easy question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do we have half an hour? Well, this is the human rights model you talked about before. We have duty bearers and we have beneficiaries. And so what we have to do first is to bring the duty bearers, and these are the states, yeah. Mainly to bring the duty bearers to the point to say, okay, we take it seriously. We have to implement inclusive health services, primary health services, and beyond, and we have to bring it in each corner of our country. So this is what we first have to do. On the other hand, NTDs have to be invited where the people live, and these are the communities. And what we also need, I think, is a kind of bottom-up advocacy. I see people with disabilities affected by NTDs in communities building in more or less informal self-advocacy groups and bring in their experiences, their needs on the table when it comes to the question, okay, what we have to do in our community to prevent people from being affected by NTDs. And this is not all about medicine, it's also about hygiene, it's about safe water, it's about health education and so on. So, and I think this is the point where we need to have the affected people in planning and implementing of that community-based programs. Yeah. On a national level, I think people with disabilities affected by NTDs has to be part in planning national health programs, health development programs. And on a global level, I would say, well, we're looking forward to the SDG summit here in New York in September this year. And we will have also a conference running alongside this event, where we have the next political declaration on universal health coverage. And we had the last political declaration on universal health coverage back in 2019, and we had some good statements regarding people with disabilities and fighting NTDs, but not really concrete. And I think in our advocacy work, I have to go to make it better this year. so far.
Thank you, Michael, for the very honest answer, and we're also realizing, had some conversation that yeah, when it comes to SDGs and NTDs are not in the agenda.
Well, they are
Yeah,
part of
but
the SDG.
yeah, but not very explicitly
No.
and not very concretely, as you said, and so we kind of got our work cut out for us. Mr. Usman, what contributions do you think can persons affected by NTDs make to the disability sector?
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the question. Well, the contribution person affected by neglected tropical disease will give to the disability sector are many. Number one, if you look at the internal politics, the population, if, for example, now, you see maybe the population of person with disability, let's say, is 100. So if they are now together with the person affected by the neglected tropical disease, the number will increase, and that the increase of number will also give them priority to participate maybe in either decision making of the country or something like, for example, let me just cite the example in Nigeria where I am. The population of persons with disability, we are projecting it to be like 31 million. For example, and with that 31 million, persons with disability are always fighting to the government to see that the person with disability is supposed to be in decision making, like maybe they need to have a representative as a minister, or a representative as a senator, or a representative of person or in the National House of Assembly. All these things will happen if, because now you will see what happened in Nigeria, because the population of women is very high. That is the reason why you will see the women have representative in the ministerial cadre, have the representative in the Senate, have the representatives in the commissioners and other government decision making. So I know the contribution neglected tropical disease can will also give in population, when the population of person with disability match together with the population of tropical neglected tropical disease. This one also will make the population to be very higher, and their voice will be listening to the highest authority. Another one is that the neglected tropical diseases, person affected by neglected tropical disease will also contribute to seeing the progress of many sectors of person with disability by maybe before that person become person with disability, if he's only having, because a neglected tropical disease will become person with disability, maybe when the issue become chronic. But if the disease did not become chronic, he can be here somehow healthy, better than person with disability. He or she can also assist person with disability in design some of the program, in giving another maybe advice, information, and other things. So what I'm thinking, the contribution they can give is, number one, it increases the number so that the voice of person with disability collectively will be heard by the highest authority. Number two, being many of the persons with neglected tropical disease, because before the disease moved to the chronic condition, they are healthy, they are better than person with disability. They can also assist in supporting some of the person with disability in either technical work or otherwise. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Usman. And my last question that is prepared is for all of you. Do you think disability is well integrated into NTD programming? And I understand that there might be a diversity of answers depending on context, and then also, is there room for improvement? And we know that there always is. But any one of you want to answer to that question?
I think I can try and jump in and provide a bit of perspective on that, because I'll first be able to start by saying that on the international level, we still also have issues in terms of recognizing the mainstream disability. We still find that most of the countries, be it developed countries or undeveloped countries, are still struggling with the laws on how to be able to better serve the disabled members within our communities. And we find that this one is a global issue. So when we come to individuals affected by neglected tropical diseases, being now kept again into a problematic sector, which is the sector of recognizing people with disabilities, that is still not yet fully working well, and the laws and regulation governing their benefits and how they're supposed to be assisted as functional members of the communities, then we find that there's a disparity in that the members being afflicted by neglected tropical diseases do not necessarily get to be seen as people who are disabled, just like Abdullahi has actually said. And that one comes with two concepts, because most of the people are usually resistant in moving into the so-called quote-unquote sector of disability, because it comes with prejudice and it comes with discrimination from all sectors. And when you find a neglected tropical disease individual who's, yes, in the medical sector is disabled because they are impaired in one way or another, but when you look at the legal definition of maybe what disability is, you find that in some countries it can be limiting to individuals who have been disabled by either factors or maybe by neglected tropical diseases. And you find that it becomes quite difficult for them to be kept in the mainstream definition of what disability is. We still also have the perception within our communities that disability is physical. It's something that you can be able to see, like a blind individual or someone who's missing a limb. But when it comes to maybe mental disability, the impairment of maybe functionality, most of the people don't consider that as a disability, and they think that they are functional individuals. But in the actual sense, or in the medical sense, they have been disabled or to some extent. Now, how this can be changed is that we will need a lot of advocacy so that we look at what disability exactly is and what disability should be, and that members who have been affected by one disability or the other, be it physically visible or non-physically visible disabilities, they should be considered as individuals, as human rights, who have the rights to be given all the access that we need within the communities and to live in a dignified way and to be productive members of the society. So I think that's what I can be able to add in terms of the mismatch within the legal definitions of what disability is and how it connects to members who have been afflicted by neglected tropical diseases.
Thank you so much. Someone else?
Yeah, in Timor we have National Disability Action Plan for 10 years that have involved the mainstreaming some ministers and Secretary of State, including Minister of Health, Minister of Social Solidarity and Inclusion, and Minister of Public Infrastructure or something. But what I'm saying is that that's in the biggest plan that we are going to have NTDs and disability is integrated into a program, because disability have some health issues, some in social issues, and many things. But in the implementation level, that's the challenge and the gaps is there, because still not having defined or understanding well on, because the NTDs can cause disability, and disability also at high risk of having NTDs, because like our brother from Sudan said that they are the one who living in the very poorest of the poorest, the poorest in an area in a country. So it's well integrated. I keep saying it's well integrated if we are consulted with the local, and they apply. They are the one who we hear their voice to implement how they suggest or they think implement or working well in the context. That's what we need to hear the idea and design accordingly. If we bring something even from international level to one level and without consulting with those in grassroots and those who experience directly, it's still if we are aiming for targets, then it's not about people, because leaving no one behind is not about the target, it's about people who are there in the community. So if they can be more actively listen and involved in the design and ask them even to implement it for themselves, then you can see the impact that we can say that yes, it's well integrated into the disability, or disability integrated into entities, or entities integrated into disability sector. Thank you.
Okay, hello.
Yes, Mr. Usman.
Well, my own will be contrary to what my brothers and sisters have said, because the way I'm doing it, integrating disability program with the NTDs is very difficult. Why? Because if you go, first of all, by definition of disability by CRDP, you look at the definition will be a long-term impairment or even permanent impairment. Well, the NTDs, if you look at it, so many of their neglected tropical diseases, unless if it move to the chronic issue, if it can easily be cured, and the people will be back to their normal body standard. So I know, as my sister mentioned, but at times, not always, at times, both of them need medical assistance, medical treatment. But you know, some of the person with disability, whenever you already become person with disability, you need many of disability need not have any treatment again. Let me set an example. A person who already become a blind, total blind, he doesn't need any treatments. Likewise, a person who become a physically challenged, he didn't need any treatment. So, but I know some of the program can take, but if you say integrating the program together, honestly, in my own view, it is very difficult to integrate disability program with NTD programs, but some of the program can be integrated. Secondly, as I earlier mentioned, and my brother Bayo has already said it, in some of the countries, persons affected by neglected tropical disease did not agree, will not accept they are person with disability. Person with disability did not accept person with neglected tropical disease as their members of the community. If we have these two issues, in terms of definition and in terms of perspective of the people within the two communities, integrating their program, I think it is very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Abdul. I think I'll be able to also add to what Brother Abdullahi has said, because we have to be careful here in terms of.
I will just ask you to be brief.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think in terms of integrating neglected tropical diseases, we have to look at it in the context of how it causes disability. Because at the onset of the disease itself, when it can be treated, we usually find that it does not cause permanent physical disability or any kind of form disability. But when it goes to the chronic stages, the later stages, that's when we find that most of the neglected tropical diseases usually cause permanent disabilities that can be able to qualify the afflicted individuals as individuals who are permanently disabled. A good example is such as our brother say, trachoma can cause permanent blindness. You can't treat that one once it has reached to that stage. Leprosy can also cause the loss of limbs. And that one will make them to be permanently disabled. So at the later stages, we can be able to say that these people who have been afflicted by neglected tropical disease have been disabled by the disease and can now be qualified as disabled individuals. So the problem is that the legal definition of that it does not exist currently, and it becomes quite difficult for that to be contextualized and for it to be integrated into the wider disability context. And that is the problem that we find it there. And I think the crossover can be found from the definition of the stage and the extent of disability. So thank you.
Michael, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, CBM is highly engaged in a network called.
Could you come a bit closer here to the
Oh,
microphone?
CBM is highly engaged in a network called the NTD NGO network. And we have a cross-cutting working group in that network. Is working on what we call disease management, disability inclusive. So you see that there is the awareness by the NGOs are organized in this network to include people with disabilities, be they affected by NTDs or not, to include them in planning and implementing processes in our programs, particularly on the community level. But if you ask me, is there room for improvement? Yes, we're not ready. Yeah, we are not ready in conceptualizing how we can efficiently do that kind of inclusion of people with disabilities in planning and implementing the programs, and we are not done in asking and answering ourselves what can we do to give people with disabilities in rural areas access to primary health care and so on. So I would say we are on the way. Yeah, I would like to see the disability movement more engaged in this, as I said, but we are not done with that. That's clear. That was brief enough, right?
Thank you so much. Yes, time is advancing, but we have a few questions here. The first question that came in, this was even before we really started the conversation, but a very important question, although I think the answers are diverse also. Have persons who have acquired disabilities due to NTDs been recognized in the national disability laws? And I think that is dependent on
Which law?
On which country, which law, and so forth. And then also, I sadly have to say, being also from a developing country, and I know that this is true, I've spoken with many persons affected by NTDs in different countries, is that sometimes in our countries laws don't matter so much because the law is there, but the implementation is not there. So that's also something that I know matters quite a bit. It's not just the law, but how is it being enacted, enforced, and so forth. Yeah. I will go through the rest of the questions. There's a question from Pradipta Nayak. hearing Mr. Usman, it looks like Nigeria has a different definition of disability where persons with blindness are not considered as persons with disabilities. Am I correct?
Oh,
Mr. Usman?
this one.
Well, the answer is no.
The answer is no.
No.
Okay.
Let me continue. The answer is no. The Nigeria does not have different definition of persons with disability. But the issue is that, for example, the umbrella organization, the Federation Organization of Disabled Persons of Nigeria have different pillars. For example, we have Nigerian Association for the Blind. We have National Association of Persons with Physical Disability. We have National Association for the Deaf and others. So each and every one of these have their own work. They are doing one thing or the other, but the umbrella body, all of them will come together so that we'll do everything. We have the same definition, but in terms of, for example, if the person affected by leprosy alone are doing their program, if you attend their program, what you'll understand is they will focus all what they are saying related to the cluster they are talking. But in a general concept, all of us are using the same terminology, the same definition to identify, to give the meaning of disability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Usman, for clearing that up and explaining a bit more. So another question, what about the discriminatory laws against persons affected by NTDs, particularly persons affected by leprosy? Is the disability sector supporting the leprosy sector? Map these, for example, persons affected by leprosy are not allowed to stand for elections. We know that's the case with some laws. In some countries, what is the disability movement doing with regards to this?
This question goes directly to you, I think.
What I'm thinking, and we've been doing some of that this week and even before, but I think also what we have to say from the people working in the leprosy field is that we also need to do a better job in engaging people from the disability field and letting them know what our common issues are and how they can partner with us. To be very honest, we've found open ears, open minds, open hearts, open doors, open arms, wherever we are willing to engage and ask people to engage. Of course, this work needs to be done, the work of knocking on doors and talking to people and raising the awareness and explaining the issue. And we all need to do it. And at every level, at every stage, everywhere. We have something here that's not a question, but I think we will all agree with it. Persons affected by NTDs should be included in universal health coverage. Yes. I think the problem is that it is not universal. If it's not including someone, if it would be universal, no one would need to be included.
Yeah.
It's an aspiration, I think. Universal health coverage still in many parts, and even in some very developed countries, there's people who are falling through the cracks. I don't know. So to the Leprosy Mission International, so we are addressed here, Tim and John and the others. I see there's other people in the. Are there ongoing interventions that connect NTDs with mental health conditions? If yes, would you like to share? If no, should this be a connection to consider? I know very well that there are interventions, quite a few. You could, I don't have the resources right here, but you can look for it both on our website of the Leprosy Mission International. You can look for it at InfoLab and at Info NTDs, and just, or I would even say just Google NTDs and mental health, and you will find quite a lot. There's still a lot to be done, and especially I would think especially at the ground level. But there are things that are going on. I've heard very interesting examples from Nigeria quite recently. But of course, there are things that we, as Michael said, there's always room for improvement. I don't know if someone else wants to jump in here.
It's really related. Currently in Timor, we are doing research on person with people affected by leprosy with under NTDs related to their mental well-being. So it's yes, we are thinking of how to support them in the way that not only treatment for the their physical, but also their mental health. So yeah, it's ongoing research that hopefully will be done soon, and we'll share and we'll do that for the advocacy to support the mental well-being of people affected by leprosy. So yeah.
Okay, we have another, I think it's mostly a comment. Unfortunately, the visibility of persons affected by leprosy and other NTDs is very less at international disability platforms. Also, we have still not been able to mainstream persons affected by leprosy and other NTDs and the challenges faced by them in other side events happening at COSP. I would say yes and no. I think the visibility is better than, for example, I met together with our representative in Switzerland. We met with Dr. Markus, Schäfer. He's from Switzerland. He's part of the CRPD, and we wanted to raise his awareness about leprosy. And the interesting thing is that he knew everything, and he was like, he knew the issues, and he was aware. And so I think we as a sector have done, and a lot of people that came before us even, and yeah, I want to make sure to include everyone. We have done a fairly good job at bringing the issue to the forefront, but we need to keep doing that. We need to, and we need to, I mean, we were able to have 2 people affected by leprosy, NTDs, Ana Ivonia and myself, at this COSP event. But of course, we need to do that more. Every possibility we get.
I think you are right there, and I should also jump in from a perspective that of a person within the neglected tropical disease sector, and I'll be able to say that the viewer is coming from a point of frustration that we usually see in the neglected tropical disease sphere. We find that leprosy is kind of like the poster boy that is being used all over, but we do know that neglected tropical diseases are almost 21 in number, almost 21 plus different diseases, and they do impact differently on the communities. And when we look at the numbers that they affect, those are billions. Leprosy is only in a number of thousands. So when you look collectively at the spotlight that is being given to leprosy alone, but the other 21, the other 20 plus neglected tropical diseases that are actually there, you find that leprosy is being spotlighted more on the basis that leprosy is kind of like visual. It can be seen. You can see that the limbs are missing. But there are other tropical diseases that cause invincible disabilities that cannot easily be seen. And I think this is where the problem lies in, because we find that these other neglected tropical diseases are usually bunched into the general health sector, and they tend to now be shrunk under that sphere of the other mainstream diseases. And that's where the spotlight needs to be brought, so that we keep aside this problem of neglected tropical diseases, because they are becoming a major health problem, especially in the developing world. And it's going to increase with these current shocks in global warming, and also these other changes within the climates, because they are going to be now priority areas. And when we don't spotlight them, and lay aside from leprosy and spotlight the neglected tropical diseases the way they are, then we're going to have a major health problems, because we're even seeing in developing countries now. Currently in the US, there's a disease being carried by a bug within the rural sectors. That's also a neglected disease, as much as not a neglected tropical disease. But we are seeing it's emerging more and more, and we are seeing cases coming on, especially with climate change and all these other changes that are happening. So I think the spotlight should be kept on neglected tropical diseases as a whole, but not just only on leprosy, so that we see the disabilities that they bring now can be joined into the mainstream disability sector, so that the ones who are suffering can be given the spotlight they deserve.
Thank you, Björn. Another common question is, we have been strongly advocating for consultation with persons with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities. The same should be applied to persons by NTDs. However, very rare do we see them being involved in policy level discussions. Is this because of lack of capacities? What should be done, or what is being done to build their capacities? How can the leadership from the sector be promoted and capacitated? I think this is almost a question for another webinar. Because what I can say is that we try to do this more and more in leprosy, also with other NTDs. Sadly, we don't have a lot of contacts of other people affected by other NTDs. It looks like Michael wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I think this is the core question the colleague raised here. And I think it's a matter of empowerment, and it's a matter of capacity building. I formally spoke about a kind of advocacy bottom up, from the community level up to, if you don't have the structures to be able efficiently to interfere in such that policy making processes on a national level or something like that, you have to build up the structures. And this is probably a task of the future for INGOs like CBM, to look if we can help people with disabilities affected by NTDs to jump into discussion, planning, decision-making processes on a national level when it comes to implement a national health strategy or something like that. And well, I hope that what I would say, I assume that we need that kind of advocacy bottom up to come to the point where we can say, okay, now we are able, now we have the capacities to jump into discussion processes on a policy level. You don't agree?
Oh, I think, Nona?
No, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and we definitely, I think, I mean, we're all trying to go in that direction. I think, I think like with people at CBM, and there's many other organizations, and even like the United Nations, WHO, the political will is there. We're still trying to figure out how is the best way to do that, and that differs in different contexts.
Yeah.
Here's a question, and we're about to finish, but is it not a good way to first integrate the person with disabilities due to NTDs in the sector of disability? I want to say something about the term disability, and it is used in different ways. Let's say, but for example, I know that in the UK, they don't speak about persons with disabilities, they speak about disabled persons, but it is clear in the concept of the organizations of disabled persons that they are disabled by society, because society puts these barriers up that prevent them from full participation. And for example, I know that the CRPD, and even in Indian, in legislation in India, I don't know if in other countries, leprosy is recognized as a disability because the fact that the person has or had leprosy constitutes sufficient barriers in practice to full participation within society. I think that's a broader question. The last comment here I see is there's no space to say from the audience. I think through the questions and so forth, there was some space, but also this is an ongoing conversation. And we've been having consultations. We're always trying to stay open. There's always space for everyone to come in, and especially as you've heard, we want persons affected by NTDs, we want persons with disabilities to have a central voice at this table, because number one, it is their human right, and because again, they're the most affected. Local people find local solutions to local problems. Thank you so much, everyone. Michael, Nona, Mr. Usman, Pierre. Thank you to our interpreters. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tim. Am I forgetting? Thank you to the End Fund, who has lent us this space, and have a great rest of the journey, or a good night.